Donald Trump is president. Again, second term, right? President number 47. With that administration taking place, we're seeing a ton of changes. He signed like hundreds of executive orders. We see some of these new appointments coming in that some people are kind of scared about. Other people, like me, are really excited about. But he's made a lot of promises. This Congress has made a lot of promises with him. And that's what I want to talk about in this episode. Maybe not all of them, because there's too many to talk about. I just want to talk about a couple of them. And then who knows, maybe a little bit more. We'll see where this goes. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Range Minded Podcast, episode 268. Carry on, my freedom son. Enjoy. The Second Amendment of the Constitution guarantees the right of American citizens to keep and bear arms. We know that. We understand that. With that, there's a lot of complications, right? There's a permitting process for some states. There's some states that are constitutional carry. And then there's other states that say, hell no, guns are scary. We're super lib. Because of these different dynamics of every state laws, city laws, that kind of thing, carrying from state to state can get pretty cumbersome. And honestly, there's a lot of folks that have fell prey from going from one state to the next and not understanding those state laws. Obviously, as we travel, we should understand the laws of which state we're traveling to when it comes to carrying a firearm. But what if concealed carry, the Second Amendment, your right to keep and bear arms, your right to self-defense, self-preservation, just imagine if that carried from state to state just like your driver's license. That's an interesting thought, right? Well, let's just say we have somebody working hard to represent his peeps up there in Washington. Richard Hudson, I think is his name. Yeah, Richard Hudson from North Carolina. That's right. He's just introduced a national reciprocity. Now, one of Trump's promises during his campaign season, I don't know, the last 4 years of him campaigning, basically, he's promised that gun owners are going to get a fair shake. I know he doesn't have the best track record if we look straight into his last administration. There were some definite gun issues, right? We know that. We understand that. We lost some freedom. In fact, he enacted more gun control than Barack Obama, but that's beside the point. But one of his campaign promises was national reciprocity. Well, Mr. Hudson from North Carolina said, okay, let's make this happen. So on January 8th of this year, Mr. Hudson introduced H.R. 38, and it's I'll have to read it here on my notes, Constitutional Carry Reciprocity Act. So this is great. Let's dive in to see exactly what this is. Talk about, I'm going to have to refer to my show notes because I'm dumb. But I want to make sure I'm concise. I want to make sure you get the information that I jotted down here. So one of the things, number one thing that this act gives or guarantees or provides for the U.S. citizens, individuals with state-issued concealed carry licenses or permits will be allowed to carry concealed firearms in any other state that permits concealed carry. This means as a permit holder, man, my headphones are acting up. I don't know if hopefully it's my headphones. They're cheap, you know. This means that the concealed carry holder's permit is good. And you get your concealed weapons permit in whatever state that you reside. And that permit is recognized in every state. I get it. I understand that the Second Amendment is your permit, right? I understand that. But in reality, states don't see it that way. And I'm still not quite sure how I feel about it. Yes, I understand that the Constitution guarantees that right. If actually the Constitution doesn't, it fortifies. God guaranteed that right. The Constitution just puts the limits on the government from impeding on that right. Okay, we got to make that completely clear. I understand that. But some states are concerned, and I get this. I understand this on an educator side of it. Sometimes it's concerning to allow everybody to carry a gun. I get that. In fact, I've had that argument when Idaho went to a constitutional carry state. I talked to the representative that introduced that bill. I had a sit down with him. It was before the podcast, so I might have that video somewhere. I don't think I do. But I talked to him about it, and he said, Steve, listen, you can't regulate a right. And he's 100% correct. So I had to kind of rethink my thoughts about that. But again, as an educator, I understand that permits kind of help keep the riffraff out, be that as it may. I know that kind of puts a dichotomy in my own thought process because the rights are guaranteed and you can't regulate a right. But I understand. Let's just put it that way. But needless to say, if you get a permit in the state that you reside, it doesn't mean that your state laws are the same as the state that whatever states that you're going to. You still need to understand, you still need to take up the responsibility of whatever those states require. Now, I know that sounds kind of messy, and I'm not quite sure how they're going to fix this, but I would imagine there still has to be some kind of compromise to these super anti-gun states to allow recognition of these permits. So I'm not sure how that all works out. I'm sure it's going to get hammered out. But nonetheless, if you travel to another state, you still have to adhere to those state laws. From what I understand, they're not going to create a national concealed carry permit, which would be interesting if they did. And maybe that is the route that they end up going, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen that way. And obviously, as the name states, reciprocity, your permit is going to be recognized in constitutional carry states as well, or, whatever that may be. So that's nice. That's nice to understand that, hey, if you go from one constitutional carry state to the next, that should still be covered. Again, I'm not quite sure how each one of these states are going to be comfortable with this, how they're going to accept it. But again, if you look at it as a driver's license, I mean, you're just still obeying those state laws, which are pretty much the same across every state when it comes to driving. But driving is a right, by the way, not a guaranteed, a privilege. Sorry, driving is a privilege, not a right. You know what I'm trying to say. And again, one thing that this proposed law does not do is set standards for every state to adhere to. It still respects the sovereignty of each state, which is important because each state is an experiment, right? So it wouldn't be fair for the feds to say, you have to recognize this, this, and this. But hopefully, as each state is willing to adopt, or I guess they're going to have to, recognize the national reciprocity, that maybe these gun laws will equalize on the freedom side, on the citizen side of each state. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting how this is going to be argued and how it gets played out. Now, it's pretty obvious to understand that a lot of pro-2A organizations are for this. Obviously, groups like the NRA, the NSSF, the GOA, and others are in support of this idea. And I'm sure that the state-level organizations, which you probably should belong to, if you're living in a state, which I imagine you are, you should probably be supporting the state-level gun rights organizations. All of these have made positive murmurings not the right word, right? Because that sounds negative. Positive rumblings about the possibility of this law. So hopefully with organizations like that have especially GOA and Firearms Policy Coalition, if they stand behind this and they have quite a bit of clout on the legal side of things, protecting your rights, this really might make a difference. Plus, some of these organizations also have, of course, they're lobbyists, but they still have some sway on the legislative side of things. And if they can get into the president's ear, or some of the upper echelons of leadership within the House, this really could make a huge difference for your rights across the country. Now, this isn't the first time that Representative Hudson has proposed this kind of a thing. In 2017, almost the exact same bill passed the House, but in the Senate, it stalled out, obviously because we had a divided leadership. But this new introduction in 2025 has a lot more support. Obviously, we won the House and the Senate during the election, plus the presidency, so we have a lot of influence on both sides. Now, there is some bipartisan support. I guess one Democrat's like, yeah, okay, let's make this happen. But I imagine when we get, again, to these liberal states, there's going to be a lot of pushback, especially states like Illinois and California, New Jersey, New York, those kind of places. There's probably going to be a lot of resistance when it comes to this. But we also have control. And the vice president is able to break the tiebreaker vote in the Senate, right? So there's a lot of things that could happen here. I imagine there's going to be some compromise. And every time we think of compromise, it's always like, okay, what are we giving up to keep the lefties happy. That seems like what compromise has been over the last few years. But I don't know if it's going to be that way this year. Again, there's a lot of excitement with this new administration. Popular vote and the collegiate vote, right? He won everything. President Trump is very popular right now in the United States. Because of that, and having control of House and Senate, I think we're going to see a lot of movement as far as pro-gun rights. At least I'm hoping so. And national reciprocity, I think, is the first real step we need to take to help citizens gain their rights back. Now, I know you may not be comfortable with this, but I really feel this way. And I know a lot of my listeners feel the same way. But there's always one or two out there that get a little uncomfortable when comments like the Second Amendment is made to restrict tyranny, which I truly believe is exactly the purpose. I mean, the founders came from a place where they were fighting for their right to survive, not just to hunt, not just to bring food onto the table, but to fight against the British, who at the time was the largest military force, the juggernaut, the giant in the room, and a bunch of ragtag backwoods hillbillies put them in their place. The Second Amendment has huge foothold ingrained into the ethos of what the United States is. So I think there's going to be a lot of positivity coming out of this bill, but you never know. You never know. I mean, I want to say the Hearing Protection Act. I could be wrong. Maybe it was the National Reciprocity thing that in 2017, but it was going to get voted on, and then Las Vegas happened, right? And then we had a lot of resistance, and that's when we lost bump stocks. Even though I don't know if bump stocks were used, I wasn't there. I didn't investigate any of this. I don't know. It just seems kind of suspicious, right? But we'll see. We'll see what these other states that have more control over their citizens when it comes to firearms use. We'll see how they present the idea of national reciprocity. I guarantee with a 99% certainty that California and Illinois are going to be very difficult to win over. Yeah, if you look, they have the highest gun laws already, the strictest gun laws on the books, yet they have a lot of issues when it comes to firearms use in crime. It's kind of interesting how that works, right? So let's just fantasize that, yeah, this bill gets passed. What are some of the repercussions? Well, let's look at it this way. So, for example, I live in Idaho, and I want to travel to California or New Jersey or Illinois. I have a permit. Even though Idaho is a constitutional carry state, I still wanted to get the permit for lots of reasons. I think it's a good idea to have a permit for lots of reasons, especially when it comes to buying more firearms. It makes it a little bit easier because the background check has already taken place. It saves a lot of time. Now, if I want to travel to California, they may recognize my permit, but I still have to adhere to their laws. We already kind of talked about this. Same thing if I go to New Jersey or New York or Illinois. I imagine those states have to change the landscape of those laws to allow citizens from other states to come in and carry. Maybe it's magazine capacity. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I don't live in those states. I'm not one of those legislators in those states. But conversely, if a resident from California wants to travel through Idaho, now they still have to follow the same laws. They can't just assume, well, Idaho is a free state and I can do whatever I want. For example, it's illegal, and this one blows my mind. It's illegal in the state of Idaho to drive with your concealed carry on your person. It's against the law. Stupidest law ever. But I can have it in my little glove box or a little, jockey box in between the seats or whatever. That's fine. I just can't have the gun in the holster inside my waistband, which totally is the stupidest law I've ever heard. But it's still a law. So they have to adhere to that, unless that gets changed, which it better. It needs to. But like I mentioned earlier, it is not just crucial, but critical that if you're even the way it is now, if you're traveling from state to state with concealed weapons, I'm not talking just a gun, mind you, knives are weapons too. If you're traveling from state to state, you need to understand what those laws are so you don't implicate yourself into a whole world of problems. Ignorance is no excuse. We've talked about this before. Just because you don't know what the state law is doesn't mean they'll give you a free pass. Most likely, they're going to execute the law to the fullest extent possible, and that can get pretty painful in a lot of different ways. So you need to understand what those states' laws are. Hopefully, with this National Reciprocity Act, a lot of those laws get kind of blanketed and leveled out where there's a lot less confusion traveling from state to state, much like the traffic laws are now, where pretty much you look and see at a traffic sign, you know what that means, and you obey to it. I'm hoping this is how it works. I don't know exactly if it will. Probably not, because some of those loonies in those states really freak out. But it'll be exciting to see, and we'll keep our eyes peeled on it. The Constitutional Carry Reciprocity Act, I think that's what it's called, has a lot of exciting implications for the sovereign citizen. Boy, I hate those people, actually. No. For free people in the United States, whenever I think of sovereign citizen, I think of those people that, those weird ones that say, oh, I don't have to pay taxes because I don't recognize myself as a man. You know what I'm saying. But there's huge implications. There's a lot of exciting things that could come from this bill. A lot of state laws could change for the freer side. Needless to say, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of robust and tumultuous conversation over this bill. And I'm kind of excited to see how this plays out. It'd be kind of fun to be a fly on the wall in the Senate chambers and in the House chambers to see exactly how some of these folks fight over it. Hopefully there'll be some live coverage and we can kind of visit that. But needless to say, you are the winner. If this bill passes, you are the winner. It is to bring more freedom back to the citizens of this country, which has been something needed for a very long time. I don't know about you, but it feels like over time we've been just kind of pushed into these little balloons of freedom when really there should be no boundaries. Unless, you're hurting somebody or whatever. But even then, if you're doing something to hurt somebody else, that's where the law should come down. You should be able to be a free person to do, whatever may. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. It'll be kind of fun. So I'll do my best to keep abreast of the situation. He said breast.
Yeah, boy.
To keep you guys notified. It'll be fun. Like I said, this should be kind of a fun experiment of legislation to see how some of these more restricted states are going to open up to the freedom of its people. So I'll keep an eye on it. I'll share it with you. We'll see how it goes. If you see stuff that I don't see, please share it with me. I think that'd be fantastic. It'd be fun. So I don't know. Let's check this out. Now, it's fantastic to think about the possibility of being able to exercise our Second Amendment rights as far as concealed carry nationwide, as it should be. But there's another thing that's been kind of toyed around over the last few months, specifically excessively over the last few weeks, about another big change that could happen in reality. Like, now has been the biggest opportunity of this specific change than ever. And that's with the ATF. That's the next thing I want to talk about that I think would be kind of fun and exciting. Obviously, you guys know what the ATF is. If not, let me re-educate yourself. Let's go to the education camp together, because I'm probably going to go there anyway. So the ATF is an agency, not elected officials, but appointed officials, an agency that regulates alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, ATF, but it also regulates explosives. That's why whenever you see, some kind of terrorist act, when there's an explosive or something within the United States, like think of the Boston bombing. That's why the ATF shows up, because that's their job to investigate. Now, they do have some good investigative authorities and powers. That's an agency that's supposed to be for that very thing. But over the years, since its inception, Congress has allowed the purview of the ATF, the director anyways, to arbitrarily make changes to gun laws without those laws going through Congress, which is the way the United States is set up, right? The purpose of our legislators is to create laws to keep people safe and free at the same time. But the agency side of things, now think of the FDA, the ATF, EPA, those kind of things, have been given almost free rein to do whatever their smart people seem to think. Like let's go back to the Meet the Press interview with the ATF in general, right? When Stephen Dettelbach and then the highest investigator, super duper cool guy that couldn't disassemble a gun. These are the people making our gun laws. The people that are making gun laws that don't really understand firearms are the ones making these regulations, these rules, these basic laws without the purview of Congress, without Congress saying, yes, this is what it is, or no, this is what it isn't. Now, I don't know. Stephen Dettelbach, he was the ATF director. He recently resigned, not designed. He designed a lot of things, but he also resigned. I'm tired. He recently resigned before Trump became president, which obviously that had something to do with it because he's a wiener. Like Stephen Dettelbach, he's just a peach. He recently resigned, but during his purview as the ATF director, we saw things like the bump stock ban and the trigger thing, the rare breed trigger thing, and a lot of other stuff that's trying to be pigeonholed down and shoved down our throat because Congress gave them the authority to. Now, I know maybe you've watched these, maybe you haven't, but at the time there were a lot of, especially with the bump stock thing and the shoulder brace, that's what it really was the shoulder brace stuff. He got pulled in front of Congress. They asked him a lot of questions, and honestly, he couldn't answer a lot of the questions that Congress was asked, especially the pro-2A representatives. They were asking him, like, well, what is an assault rifle? And he says, well, what does the law say an assault rifle is? That kind of thing. He wouldn't answer any questions. He would just refer them to the law as to say, hey, I can't make laws. You have to create the laws and I'll enforce them. Even though they've already arbitrarily made all these rules without Congress's approval, he also wouldn't say, hey, I need to define what these are. This is what the definition is, because he knew it was going to pin him down on something that was not really approved. He's not an idiot. He's a moron, but he's not an idiot. He understood exactly what he's doing. So anyway, here we are, the ATF, directorless. We're hoping we get an amazing ATF director. We should see. I don't think it's going to be Brennan Herrera, by the way. And maybe that's better that it's not him. I don't know. That's besides the point. But now here we see the ATF is really an obsolete agency. We've gone from the NFA from the 30s to the ATF coming into play, what was it, 70s, 80s. There's a long span just between there that there was a lot of taxes being collected, right? Well, from the 80s, really from the 90s, well, maybe more like 2004 when the assault weapons ban expired, till now. I mean, there's been a lot of suppressors purchased. There's been a lot of Form 1s, Form 4s, right? All this stuff has been done, and a lot of revenue's been collected. This is where I see the biggest stopping point, or the hardest way to abolish ATF is because of the revenue that's been collected. I mean, millions and millions and millions of dollars. But the laws are just rules that the ATF's generated. They're not really laws. The ATF says, hey, this is an assault weapon. This is a short-barreled rifle, and that's just the way it is. And our rule has the full weight of the law behind it. Well, how's that fair? Congress didn't really vote on this. Why are you changing it? The arm brace. That's probably better. That's probably a better analogy because I think Congress did actually say SBRs is, this is the definition. But when it comes to arm braces or bump stocks or rare breed triggers, Congress allowed the ATF to make these rules without the weight of Congress making them a law, and then allowed the ATF to enforce these things, which are completely arbitrary. Completely arbitrary. Is it time for the ATF to go? I guess that entire monologue was just to say, should we abolish the ATF? That would have been faster, right? That would have saved you, 10 minutes? Maybe not quite 10. Is it time to get rid of the ATF? Should we abolish a tyrannical agency? Well, there's a lot of complications that come with that, and that's why I wanted to discuss this a little bit more. Now, there's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons when it comes to completely deteriorating a rogue agency. And that in itself, just that phrase right there should be yep, let's go. Let's get rid of it. So I wanted to discuss those pros and those cons, just to let you kind of marinate it inside your mind and see what exactly you guys think. I still have an idea of where you guys fall on this, but I think it's good to discuss it and weigh, the pros and cons just in case. So I came up with a list of 4 pros that we're going to talk about first, as far as pros about getting rid of the ATF. And one we really already hit, right? And that is the overreach of this agency. We already talked about rare breed triggers and bump stocks and shoulder braces, that kind of thing. All of those were rules created by the ATF without going through Congress. It really is kind of a rogue agency just making rules willy-nilly, much like the EPA, which is important because the Supreme Court ruled on something, Chevron deference, which kind of changes the power of these agencies, it was a huge deal. Despite when I think the ruling on Chevron deference is a big, big deal when it comes to agencies like the ATF or the EPA or the FDA for that matter. So number one biggest pro is getting rid of an agency that completely does its own thing without the purview of Congress. All right, number 2 on my list, and this one always gets people riled up, especially pro 2A people or really anti-gun people, like both ends of the spectrum get really riled up about this, but it's a big deal. The ATF in its history, it has not been free from some major controversies. You don't believe me? Well, let's talk about Ruby Ridge or Waco or Fast and Furious. The agency has done a lot of really deplorable things, all under the guise of, hey, we got to follow these laws. Those people had stuff they weren't supposed to have. Ruby Ridge, I live in Idaho. Ruby Ridge took place in northern Idaho in the 80s. They killed Randy Weaver's wife and child. Right? They did a stakeout for months, and they did a lot of shady stuff to try and incriminate him. And how do we know what they did was illegal? Well, they settled. They settled out of court, right? They gave him like $4 million, but they didn't give him his wife and kid back. They couldn't because they took that from him. That's not something that a well-meaning agency just trying to make sure people follow the rules. That's not something. They broke rules to incriminate a guy, and then they killed members of his family. That doesn't sound like a very upright and praiseworthy agency. Well, let's talk about Waco. It wasn't very long after. I was 93. I remember the siege, watching it on the news. And yeah, they sure did a good job. The media did a fantastic job of painting David Koresh and the Branch Davidians as these wacko, machine gun toting, super anti-government folks. Well, maybe that wasn't quite the way it was. Much like Ruby Ridge, but probably on a much more deplorable level, they killed a lot of people, all for the sake of keeping people safe. Are you kidding me? You burned people alive. That's pretty gross. And that should piss a lot of people off. Do some digging into Ruby Ridge. Do some digging into Waco and find out what really, really happened. There's a lot of good books and documentaries on them out there. The ATF, they got their hands bloody on both of those. Okay, 2 examples. What? Fast and Furious was just as bad? Yeah. Fast and Furious was disgusting as well. Here's the government under Obama and Eric Holder. They're going to border town FFL dealers saying, hey, you have to sell. We're monitoring things. Things are going good. There's going to have some people come in. You need to sell them these guns, even though they're not going to be able to pass background checks or they're not citizens or whatever. You need to sell them these guns, and you'll be like, we're trying to do this operation, a sting operation. Sure, these FFL dealers say, okay, yeah, we'll make it work. As long as, the feds say it's okay. Yep. Eric Holder's buddies say, yeah, you're protected. We need to do this.
Allegedly.
So, yeah, some of these dealers transfer guns to people that aren't allowed to have guns, including fully automatic weapons, by the way. Well, it turns out that Eric Holder, the Department of Justice, decided to throw the book at the FFL dealers because they transferred guns to people that weren't allowed to have them, even though, hey, you're going to be safe. Nope, just kidding, you're not. So they traffic guns to the cartels. The American government, Barack Obama is solely responsible for this, and his homie Eric Holder. They traffic guns to the cartels across the border. Totally illegal. This is documented. Like, this isn't just some kind of a conspiracy theory that I wear with a tinfoil hat and talk about. No, this really happened. And to make things worse, those guns were used in a lot of crime that took place across the border, including killing border agents. Barack Obama is directly responsible for having federal agents killed with an illegal gun operation that he approved, and the DOJ made the FFL dealers go for it, and the ATF was totally involved in this. So there is obviously some big deals with the ATF, some major red flags, if you will, that agency should not be allowed to govern what goes on. Like they've made some major issues. I'm not going to call them mistakes because they were cognitive decisions by this agency. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Just those three in itself should be enough to be like, screw this agency. And I'm sure there's other things. In fact, I remember hearing rumblings. I'm going to have to do some digging, but I remember hearing rumblings that Operation Fast and Furious wasn't the first time that the government had done something just like that happened before. I'm going to have to do some digging. I can't remember where I heard that. So that might just be hearsay, as this is. So there's number 2. The agency is not capable of keeping their own people on a leash. And the number 3 thing on this list of pros about getting rid of the ATF is redundancy. And I know Trump has been all about this, like firing tax agents and all this stuff, like all this glut of spending that the government does. Now, as far as redundancy, the ATF, yeah, it does a lot of things. It has a lot of resources to look into explosions and gun trafficking and that kind of stuff. So do the local agencies and the FBI. Like they all kind of do the same thing. So by gutting the ATF or completely abolishing it, it's not that we're going to lose investigative power. Other agencies have the ability to step in. And that's really already what happens. The FBI and state police and sometimes the sheriff's detectives, like they're already doing the same thing that the ATF does. It's just the ATF has a bigger umbrella, right? They have more jurisdiction. But so does the FBI. So there's a redundancy of work being done when really some of these other agencies could totally pick up the slack and, save the American people a lot of money. So redundancy, that's another reason to get rid of it. All right, number 4 on the list is there's a lot of restrictions that the ATF has imposed through their rulemaking on the American public. Now, I remember, I guess I don't remember, but I'm old enough to know when there really wasn't a background check system there, right? NICS wasn't really a thing until the 90s. In fact, before that, before I was born, you could mail order whatever you wanted and have it delivered right to your doorstep. When I was a kid, boys my age in high school, they would have gun racks in the back of their truck with their rifle in the school parking lot. No issues. The ATF has been really, really good at creating burdensome rules to a law-abiding public. So let's look like the NFA, for example. Now, I know that was created in the 30s and it was voted on by Congress, but we're talking short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns. Why? Why the short-barrel stuff? Why is that so hard? Well, they said back then it was a gangster thing. Whatever, babyface Malone's going to show up with his Tommy gun and shoot up a bank or whatever. But there's a lot of underlining things that was going on at the same time. Prohibition, mobsters were all over the place, fighting against the laws that the government was creating, and then they created more laws to keep these gangsters from doing whatever. Yeah, there was a lot of violence, and I totally get it. They were breaking the law. But law-abiding citizens were being hurt as well. Suppressors, for example. You're telling me that I can't make my gun quieter, so I'm going to risk losing my hearing because of a law that was enacted in the 30s? That's stupid. It was almost 100 years ago. It's not like super quiet. Like it's not invisible. It's not an invisible sound signature. It's still going to make noise. But I could help protect my hearing in the meantime. That should be a public safety thing. We should want suppressors on our firearms. In other countries, it's uncouth to hunt without a suppressor. And those are countries that have draconian gun laws. We're supposed to be the free country, the bastion of firearms freedom, and we're not allowed to put a suppressor on our gun unless we get an okay from the big guy, right? That's so stupid. So these gun laws are restrictive on law-abiding people, while we're seeing thugs out there with Chinese knockoff Glock switches shooting up their neighborhoods in gun-free states, right? Well, they have their most restrictive gun laws, but these thugs are going around shooting up neighborhoods in these states with the most the most gun control. It makes no sense. Almost like criminals don't obey the gun laws, but the law-abiding do. So it puts on this burden for people that are trying to be good kids. It puts the burden on them. That's a little unfair and stupid, honestly. Now, because I have to play a little bit of a devil's advocate, because I want you guys to actually think about the what-ifs of abolishing the ATF, we have to look at the side that says, no, we need to keep it. And I came up with a few items that I think, are pro-ATF, if you will. I don't really like the agency. So there's already a bias here. But I'm going to do my best to share these and tell me what you think, about them. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. We'll see. Probably the biggest thing, and even Stephen Dettelbach said the same thing, by abolishing the ATF, we might lose the ability of investigating gun crime and prosecuting these individuals that create, mass destruction or whatever with these firearms. The investigative properties of the ATF are, it's nationwide. We already mentioned that some of these other agencies are duplicating stuff that's already there that the ATF does. But nonetheless, people that are pro-ATF or ATF are going to say, we need the investigative properties, we need the prosecution properties of the ATF available so the fullest extent of the law can be executed against criminals. That was the number one thing I came up with. Another thing along that, train of thought is like the tracing program. I remember I worked at a couple different gun stores, and more than once I've had the ATF call and say, hey, we're running a trace on this firearm. We know it came from your shop, which is funny. How do they know it came from the shop if there's not some kind of registry? But that's a different argument, right? Different conversation altogether. But anyway, the ATF is called and said, hey, we're running a trace on this gun. Who bought it? When did they buy it? Does the serial number match what they, that kind of thing. So that does exist. But does it need to? The only thing that really matters is this: a gun was used to commit a crime. The gun isn't the issue. The bad guy is the issue. All right, number 2 on my pro-ATF list is, without the ATF making these rules and regulations, the possibility that means that the states have to jump in and integrate some of these laws that the ATF was trying to procure. So that means it's a bigger burden on these states that are trying to do more gun control. Now they have to, generate these bills to create laws to keep their people safe, right? So without the ATF, that means the state has to do more work. But that kind of is what it is. Now this is actually probably a pretty legitimate argument about keeping the ATF while still being pro-gun. Is if the ATF is gone, that could mean there's other gun laws, not just rules, but actual gun laws that get voted on and brought in federally. So what do I mean by that? So the ATF gets gone. Hallelujah. Great deal. But then somehow Congress comes in and says, we need to make these law. Now we're screwed, right? Because they're law, not a rule. Now they are totally enforceable, and we can't say, well, a rogue agency is making these because Congress voted on these. So maybe it's a good idea to keep the agency alive, though maybe neutered down a great deal, to make sure that they're creating rules that Congress approves instead of laws that Congress passes. That makes sense? I mean, think about it in reality. If there are no rule makers on the ATF level of stuff, at some point there's going to be majority Democrat in the House, Senate, and President. That happens, right? We see that happen all the time. Well, maybe not all the time, but regularly when a new administration comes in. So if there is no rule making at the ATF level and these uber lefties come in and create some drastic gun law changes, and I'm not talking like the Safer Community Act, but I mean like something severe, like no magazine fed firearms. That's a law. I mean, that could be a big deal. So maybe we don't want to get rid of the ATF completely. Maybe we, like I say, we just really prune down the ability of an agency to where it's really not legislative, investigative, and has some prosecution, not prosecutorial, but some way to execute laws in a way like law enforcement type thing. still keeps Congress at bay a little bit. That might be something to think about. So if the ATF were to get abolished tomorrow, there's probably, in reality, 3 outcomes that we could expect. First of all, loosening of gun restrictions. We get rid of the Hearing Protection Act. No, we enact the Hearing Protection Act. We get rid of the NFA, so where we can have short-barreled rifles, machine guns, that kind of thing, which I'm totally for, by the way. I think we should be allowed to have machine guns and SBRs and SBSs. I think the only really thing that really hinders the Second Amendment is price point, right? Consumerism should really dictate what's available on the market. And maybe that's too much. Maybe I'm even wrong there. If I want to be able to buy a tank that functions, great, I should be allowed to. Maybe that cost is a little exorbitant and I can't afford to. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong there. Anyway, so that's what I'm saying. There could be 3 outcomes. So loosening of federal gun laws, that's one of them. Another potential outcome is nothing changes, nothing whatsoever. Everything we have stays the same, but Congress maintains that they stay the same and not the ATF. And maybe that's good. Maybe that's bad. I don't know. I still think we need to get rid of the NFA, though. Come on, guys. Scratch our back, too, once in a while. The number 3 thing that we could expect to change is stuff gets drastically worse. Congress passes these terrible gun control laws nationwide, and our rights really get infringed on. Any of these outcomes are possible. We just don't know. That's where, obviously, we have to maintain a quality Supreme Court with people with both perspectives, not all one-sided. I think that's important to make sure that these laws stay free, that we stay free, that the government doesn't walk on our toes and tell us no. What do you guys think? This whole ATF debate is way too complex to talk about, the last 20 minutes we spent on it. There's way more that needs to come into play. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of discussion, and this is on the table, right? This is on the table in this session of Congress. So I'll keep you guys abreast. I'm really interested to see how this plays out, just like the National Reciprocity Act carries out. I'm curious. I would love to see more freedoms available to us as citizens. We should be able to have whatever we can afford, as long as, if there's a crime committed with something, maybe that's how control happens as well. The 20,000 gun laws that already are on the books are actually getting executed and followed through on. That actually might have an effect on gun crime. I know, call me, a wizard or something. That really could be the way things actually slow down. I like the idea of abolishing the ATF, and even I'm not against even really pruning down its power. Maybe the investigative and that kind of thing, maybe those properties of the ATF, that might be necessary. Maybe we keep all that stuff there. But as far as restricting your rights and my rights of what firearm we choose to purchase, just needs to be out of the question, that we can buy what we want. I mean, seriously, I can buy an AR pistol with a 10-inch barrel. Actually, I can make a pistol all the way up to a 16-inch barrel, but I can't have a 14-inch with a stock. That makes no sense. There really is, there's no difference between it. It's just one is on the naughty list and the other isn't. One is not more deadly than the other. Like, I can have something short and I can have something really long, but I can't have the one in the middle because it's the most dangerous. That is so silly. And that's really not what the NFA, like, they weren't concerned about these short-barreled rifles in the 30s. That's not what the concern was. There was a lot more involved. Like, I don't know, maybe taxation and control. Maybe that was really what it boiled down to. That'd be interesting, right? Anyways, what did I miss? Tell me what I missed. Where am I wrong? I'd love to hear your comments about this. I think it's exciting to know that your rights have a great potential of being restored over the next 4 years. That is amazing. I don't know if you guys appreciate how fantastic it really could be. You tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me your thoughts on national reciprocity. Do you like the idea? Do you hate the idea? What are your concerns about it? And what do you really like about national reciprocity? Same thing with the ATF debate. Do you like the idea of getting rid of the ATF? Do you think we should keep some of it? Or do you think we should keep all of it? I'm curious. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. Please put it in the comments. Send me an email, text me, whatever. Let me know. I'm really curious. Anyways, gang, that is all I have for you today. I could talk longer, but I want to let you guys go. You guys need free time as well as me. I mean, I still have to edit, and that takes forever for a retard like myself. So that's it. I don't have anything else for you other than this. If you want to help support the show, you can buy a patch at rangemindedpodcast.com. If you want to do something that can support me without spending any money, which is still cool, you can like and share this video. You can hit the notification bell if you want. That'd be great. That's if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble. If you're just listening to the show on a podcast level, you can obviously subscribe to the show there, maybe leave a comment and share it. That honestly helps way more than you guys understand. If you're not a content creator, if you haven't done this, I mean, I've been doing this for 7 years. Those likes and shares and comments help a ton, and it's greatly appreciated. You don't have to. I mean, whatever. Even if you don't like the show, tell me why you don't like it. I don't care. It is what it is. You can find me on all sorts of social media platforms, whether it be Twitter or X, Rangeminded. That's what, at Rangeminded on Twitter. At Rangeminded Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, and TikTok, because it didn't go anywhere. I wasn't surprised that it stuck around, but you can reach me there as well. Also, I have a Substack, but I don't really do much with it. I've published a few articles on there. It's Rangeminded Podcast on there as well. Anyway, we love you guys. I love you so much. I have some stuff coming up that I'm excited to share with you, but we're going to burn that bridge when it gets there. So I want you guys to make sure you take somebody shooting. Be good stewards of the Second Amendment. Share our rights with as many people as possible because we want our family to grow. There's nothing like a big old family reunion at the range, right? And along with taking somebody shooting, you got to remember that you have to, as always and forever, stay range-minded. See you guys.